People do want some advice, and they want to know kind of what their rights are, what they have to do, what they don't have to do when they're pulled over. So let's talk a little bit about that, Chris, if we can. If somebody is out there driving their automobile, maybe they've had a drink or several drinks, and they do get pulled over by a police officer, what are their obligations from a cooperation standpoint with the police officer? What information do they have to give, and what do they have to do to be in compliance with the law, but at the same time perhaps not jeopardize their rights?
The most important thing I would say to anyone watching this is, one, don't drink and drive, but if you're in that situation, the most important thing is be respectful to the police officer. I've had cases where people were very respectful to the officer. Even though they did some things that were wrong, they got a lot of mercy. But I had other clients who say, they were kind of jerks and stuff, and they didn't get very good deals because the way you treat the police officer matters. But as far as your legal rights, you have a Fourth Amendment right as far as your vehicle. It's not the same as your house. So let's just say someone gets pulled over and the police see that there's a bag of marijuana next to you. Well, they don't need a search warrant for that because that's in plain sight. So they have every right to arrest you, take that into evidence. But in a different example, let's say that you get pulled over and you have something illegal in the trunk or the glove compartment. In that situation, it's not plain sight. The police officers generally would need to get a search warrant because you still have a Fourth Amendment right. Now, as far as the taking a breathalyzer, not taking a breathalyzer, I usually get that question. I would generally recommend, if you've been drinking, to refuse the breathalyzer, and here's why. Alabama is a double minimum state, meaning if you blow over a .15, that's felony DUI, and that's not misdemeanor DUI. So if you've been drinking and they ask you to blow, then it's better to just say, no, thank you, officer, because then you're going to get charged with DUI, but you're probably not going to get charged with a felony DUI. And as far as the administrative suspension that will happen, what we can do is, I do this for every case, is when they get their license suspended, you have 45 days to appeal that. We appeal that to circuit court, and that stays the suspension usually for about 5 months. And then you work with the administrative agencies at that time and try to negotiate a deal so they're not suspended for 180 days. Maybe it's 40 days or 20 days, but you can put that, you have an absolute right to stay that so you can continue your job and make arrangements so you're not going to lose employment or things like that.
Now, is it an automatic suspension of your driver's license for 6 months if you refuse to take the breathalyzer test?
Generally, yes. If you refuse, it's 180 days. But again, one thing we do, which is a little legal technical, if you write a letter within 10 days to the administrative agency and the police officer hasn't gotten the paperwork in, or they didn't do what they needed to do, you can actually they don't get suspended at all. I had 3 cases in a row where all I did was write one letter, but the paperwork wasn't done, it wasn't in the system, and all those clients didn't have their license suspended for even a day. Now, they're getting much better at that, but for the most part, you're going to want to do that after 45 days. And again, whenever we talked about like counseling, getting people help, that actually helps with that too. If I can talk to the people involved in that and say, this person's getting help, they're doing counseling, they're doing great, this is what the district attorney said about them, that'll make a real difference. And even on the, like, maybe they won't suspend them for quite as long, but generally speaking, it's better not to take a breathalyzer because you're giving evidence of a felony if you drank too much. Now,
do the police officers have breathalyzers on them in their vehicle to do on the spot?
Generally they do, but I think they generally take you to the police station. I think that's the official one, and that's where they do it. So they can also do field sobriety tests. They can do a variety of things.
Now, with respect though, if they have a breathalyzer on them, I could envision a scenario where somebody gets pulled over and they've only had 1 beer. They clearly don't think that they're impaired, and they think to themselves, well, the police officers asked me to take a breathalyzer. I know Chris Reed said don't do it, but if I do it, I know I'm not impaired, I know I'm going to be below the legal limit, maybe the police officer will just let me go and leave. What advice would you give there? Still not do it?
No, in that situation, absolutely. If you haven't drank, or if you had 1 drink, take the breathalyzer, because the legal limit is .08. And unless you weigh 50 pounds, you're not going to be over that for having 1 drink. Now, a lot of people will say they had one drink, but it's like 6 shots. So I was like, oh, it's just one drink. I was like, that may have been in one container, but that's not the same thing. So yes, in that situation, one beer, take it, and you're perfectly in your rights, and you're not even close to impairment at that level.
Now, is there any threshold requirement that the police officer has to meet in order to administer a breathalyzer? In other words, does he have to have suspicion that you're impaired in some way, or can they just say, hey, I smell alcohol on your breath, or even, I don't smell it, I just want you to take the breathalyzer?
Generally, police officers are very bright, so they're going to be able to kind of assess that quickly, but Alabama, we have implied consent, so the fact that you have a driver's license, the fact that you're driving means that you are consenting to a breathalyzer or a field sobriety test. So technically you have to consent, but the consequence is your license will be suspended for 180 days.
Yeah. Now, if we have time before the break, you had mentioned about searching the vehicle, and if an individual does not give consent to the police officer to search the vehicle, then under what circumstances can the police officer get a search warrant? Is that something they can get on the spot? They can make a call and get it, or what's the process in that regard?
There's a lot of different ways to get a search warrant. Sometimes you have to get it from a judge. Judge gets that. Sometimes you can get it from, if you have a drug-sniffing dog and it barks, then that might be sufficient for probable cause for them to do it. But generally, it's the same as getting a warrant to search someone's house. They usually they can detain you while they're getting the search warrant, but if they think you're not like a serious priority, maybe you're just, a college kid they think may have weed, they generally aren't going to waste an hour or 2 hours of their time if that's the case. Now, if they look you up and you're a drug trafficker, they are going to find a way to get a warrant. You're not going anywhere. Yeah. So some of that just depends on the situation the police are in.